I'm Esther. Welcome back to Once Upon a Crime. In this bonus episode, we revisit one of the most disturbing serial killer cases in U.S. history, John Wayne Gacy, the man who buried 29 victims beneath his home. I'll break down the real story behind Gacy's crimes, how he evaded law enforcement for years, and review the new Peacock series Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy. We'll look at what the show gets right, what it leaves out, and how the facts of this infamous case compare to the drama. If you want the full story behind the headlines, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Before I get into my review, let's revisit the actual case, the crimes, the investigation, the trial, and the execution of the man infamously known as the Killer Clown. We want to thank Completing the Puzzle for sponsoring today's episode. For puzzles made easy, go to completingthepuzzle.com. It's basically Netflix for puzzles. Rent, solve, return, repeat. Use our coupon code OUAC for $10 off your first subscription box or gift card. Completing the Puzzle, because no one's been murdered while doing a puzzle. John Wayne Gacy was born March 17, 1942 in Chicago, the only son of John Stanley and Marion Gacy. He grew up in a strict Roman Catholic household, where his father, an alcoholic, routinely beat and belittled him, calling him dumb, stupid, and a sissy. He also predicted his son would, quote, grow up queer. Gacy spent much of his childhood desperately trying to earn his father's approval, a battle he would never win. Gacy was also a sickly child. After being struck in the head by a swing at age 11, he suffered blackouts from an untreated blood clot. Even then, his father accused him of faking his symptoms. He was also sexually abused by a family friend, but never told his father for fear of being blamed or beaten again. Despite the turmoil at home, Gacy was close to his mother and sisters, a relationship that further enraged his father. Gacy's emotional world was shaped by this mixture of hatred, yearning, and humiliation, dynamics that would shadow him into adulthood. What stands out most to me about Gacy's early years is how many of the factors we often see recur in the biographies of serial killers appear in his childhood. He grew up with chronic physical and emotional abuse, was sexually abused, lived with a domineering father who controlled and belittled him, and a second parent who compensated by overprotecting and coddling him. Layered onto that were early head injuries, something frequently noted in offenders who later exhibit poor impulse control or emotional dysregulation. And he had a deeply fractured sense of self. Individually, none of these elements guarantee the development of psychopathy or violent behavior. Plenty of people experience trauma, neglect, or medical issues and never become offenders. But when these factors intersect, ongoing abuse, lack of secure attachment, neurological injury, and an unstable identity, they can create what researchers often describe as a perfect storm. In some, already predisposed to antisocial traits, this mixture can distort emotional development, blunt empathy, and ultimately set the stage for predatory behavior. In Gacy's case, that combination appears to have shaped a personality capable of extraordinary manipulation and violence. At 18, Gacy became involved in local Democratic Party politics, again drawing criticism from his father. Gacy's father continued to control him by withholding money and the car he purchased for him until Gacy finally left home at age 20. Dropping out of high school, Gacy relocated to Las Vegas, Nevada. He found employment as a mortuary attendant, where he was offered a place to stay. He slept on a cot behind the embalming room. Gacy became fascinated by dead bodies, ghoulishly communing among them after hours. He eventually returned to Chicago and attended business school, graduating in 1963. He moved to Springfield, Illinois, to take a management position and became engaged to coworker Mary Lynn Myers. He joined the JCs, a leadership training organization. After he and Mary Lynn married, they moved to Iowa, where Gacy became the manager of one of his father-in-law's KFC franchise restaurants. The couple had 2 children. Now that Gacy was a successful business person and a family man, his father finally expressed pride in his son. That approval, however, was short-lived. Gacy, who would later identify as bisexual, had entered into homosexual relationships before his marriage, but in Chicago, he began preying on young boys. In 1968, Gacy was arrested for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy whose father was a local politician. Gacy's pattern of grooming, coercion, and predation had already begun. He tried to silence the victim by hiring another boy to beat him to intimidate him from testifying, which only resulted in additional charges. While awaiting trial, Gacy was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. He was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Convicted of sodomy, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. His wife divorced him, and Gacy never saw his children again. He served only 18 months before being granted parole. He was deemed a model prisoner, even heading up a chapter of the JCs while incarcerated. After his release in 1970, Gacy moved in with his mother and married once more in 1972, this time to his former high school sweetheart, Carol Hoff. He started a construction business, PDM Contractors. He began hiring young men and teenage boys, luring many of them into situations where he could sexually assault or coerce them to perform sexual acts. He was reported twice for assaulting teenage boys during this period. Both cases were dismissed. Crucially, the Iowa Parole Board was never notified of these new allegations. Then in 1972, Gacy bought the house that would become synonymous with his crimes, 8213 West Somerdale Avenue in the Chicago suburb of Norwood Park Township. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy murdered at least 33 young men and boys, though investigators believe there may be many more. Gacy's victims ranged in age from 14 to 21 years old. They included employees, acquaintances, and strangers he lured from the bus station or off the streets. Some victims believed they were dealing with a police officer. Gacy often carried a badge and outfitted his car with red lights. He raped, tortured, and murdered his victims, burying 29 bodies in the crawl space beneath his house, the garage, and a patio. When he ran out of room, he dumped additional bodies into the Des Plaines River. Some victims survived, reported their assaults, and were ignored by the Chicago Police Department. Their reports were dismissed as consensual encounters. Families of boys reported missing were told that their sons and brothers were most likely runaways. A recurring theme in this case, and one the Peacock series highlights well, is the devastating combination of homophobia, negligence, and disbelief by authorities that allowed Gacy to continue killing for so long. Everything changed on December 11, 1978, when 15-year-old Robert Peast disappeared after telling his mother he was going to speak with a contractor, John Wayne Gacy, about a job. Des Plaines police took the report seriously, unlike CPD's early handling of other cases. A search warrant on December 13th led investigators to items linking Gacy to other missing boys. Police conducted around-the-clock surveillance on Gacy, who spiraled under the pressure, drinking heavily. On December 20th, he cracked and confessed to his attorney that he had killed, quote, many, many people. A second confession to police followed. Officers recovered bodies from the crawl space under Gacy's home and later from the river. Gacy ultimately admitted to at least 30 murders. Gacy's trial began on February 6, 1980. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming he had multiple personalities, including a homicidal alter ego named Jack Hanley. The jury didn't buy it. After less than 2 hours of deliberation, Gacy was convicted on all 33 counts and sentenced to death. He spent 14 years on death row, giving interviews, painting macabre clown portraits, and filing appeals, all of which were eventually denied. John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. His last meal, famously, included a bucket of KFC. Hey everyone! Before we get back to the episode, I want to introduce you to our newest sponsor, Completing the Puzzle, the subscription puzzle service that is officially my favorite new way to spend a cozy night in. So here's the deal. Every month, they send you a beautiful, high-quality jigsaw puzzle. You put the pieces together, literally, and when you're done, you send it back for free, and they swap it out for a brand new one. No clutter, no storage prices, no suspicious pile of puzzles lurking in the corner like evidence you haven't disposed of yet. And because this is once upon a crime, let me just say this. If you've ever wanted to practice your detective skills without getting, arrested, this is the perfect hobby. You get all the satisfaction of solving something without any fingerprints left at the scene. Plus, we're heading into the holiday season, which makes this a great time to gift a subscription to someone you love. Or host a cozy winter puzzle night with friends or family. Hot cider, fuzzy blankets, everyone working together to crack the case of the missing corner piece. You know that one. And for our viewers, we've got a special deal. Use the code OUAC at checkout for $10 off a subscription or gift card. That's 33% off your first month. So head on over to completingthepuzzle.com, use code OUAC, and start solving your monthly mystery today. Completing the puzzle, because no one's been murdered doing a puzzle. So let's shift to the new Peacock series that aired in October 2025. Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy, is not the first dramatization of this case. Far from it. But it's the first one I feel truly prioritizes the right things. Creator and showrunner Patrick McManus insisted that the series avoid sensationalizing Gacy. 7 of its 8 episodes are named for individual victims and focus on their lives, not their deaths. There are no murder reenactments, no graphic scenes, and very little attention is paid to the killer clown persona that the media latched onto for decades. This alone sets the tone. This is not a story about Gacy. It's about the boys and the young men whose lives were stolen. The series draws on the 2021 documentary John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise, and years of journalist interviews, especially from those who've spent decades digging into overlooked leads and uninvestigated connections. Here's how the series lines up with reality. Facts portrayed accurately include Robert Peace's disappearance did spark the investigation that led to Gacy's arrest. Most of the bodies were buried on Gacy's property, 29 in total. Gacy actually met First Lady Rosalind Carter shortly before his arrest. And Chicago PD repeatedly failed to investigate earlier reports, as accurately shown in the series. Fiction or creative license taken by the show creators include that the series portrays victims' families arriving at the prison hoping to witness Gacy's execution and being turned away. In reality, they were notified ahead of time that they would not be allowed to attend. The only eyewitnesses to Gacy's execution included members of the legal teams, law enforcement members, and some media representatives. In an article in Rolling Stone magazine dated October 24, 2025, titled 4 Things Devil in Disguise John Wayne Gacy Leaves Out by Elizabeth Garber Paul, she identifies several notable admissions in the series. The long-standing theory that Gacy may have had more than 33 victims, some possibly buried at other properties. Some investigators believe that as a contractor, Gacy had access to several buildings around the Chicago area where he could have buried other victims. A property in the area of Miami and Elston Avenues is often cited, as it is one where Gacy's mother had previously resided. Witnesses recalled seeing Gacy at various times, carrying shovels and dragging large heavy garbage bags on the property. In 1998, the property was excavated, but nothing was found. Allegations that prominent Chicago political figures knew about Gacy's activities. Journalists Allison True and Tracy Ullman researched Gacy for the original Devil in Disguise documentary and report that they have, quote, over 5,000 pages of research that showed the Democratic machine knew about John Wayne Gacy, end quote. True claims Gacy was friends with top Chicago political figures, police officers, and others who knew specifically about the young men Gacy was luring to his home and sexually assaulting. And finally, possible links between Gacy, known sex trafficker John David Norman, and even Houston serial killer Dean Corll, aka the Candyman. These connections are controversial, but backed by significant research, including Corll's MO was similar to Gacy's. He kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and tortured young men before killing them and burying their bodies. 27 bodies of Coral's victims were found on his Houston, Texas property, similar to Gacy. Coral was killed by 17-year-old Elmer Wayne Hemley in 1973. Notorious pedophile and sex trafficker John David Norman's home was raided just days after Coral was killed. Shortly afterward, Norman fled to Homewood, Illinois, located on the outskirts of Chicago, and within months was arrested for multiple counts of indecent liberties with a child and sentenced to 4 years in prison. In prison, Norman and another inmate, Philip Paskey, restarted the sex trafficking ring. Paskey continued the operation once he was released and operated in Chicago. Gacy would later claim he'd had accomplices and named Paskey as one man who'd helped him lure young men and murder them. According to the October 24th article in Rolling Stone, quote, "It has been independently verified that Paskey worked for Gacy, potentially putting Gacy in the orbit of Dean Coral, one of the most notorious sex traffickers and pedophiles of the 20th century." As a true crime storyteller, I have seen countless depictions of the Gacy case, and many of them fall into the trap of sensationalizing the killer, lingering on his clown persona, his bizarre personality, or the grisly details of his crimes. What I appreciated about Devil in Disguise was its restraint. It centers on the victims and the devastating failures that allowed Gacy to operate unchecked. It highlights family perspectives, community impact, and the heartbreaking accounts of boys who survived his attacks but were ignored. It also honors the victims as individuals, each one with their own dreams, families, and futures, something we always strive to do here on Once Upon a Crime. Is the series comprehensive? No. And no 8-part dramatization could be. There are still mysteries and unanswered questions surrounding this case, and new research continues to emerge. But as a dramatization grounded in fact, empathy, and careful storytelling, it succeeds. I recommend it, not for the shock value, but for the humanity at its center. Thanks for watching this deep dive into the John Wayne Gacy case and the new Devil in Disguise series. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit like, subscribe, and share it with other true crime fans. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the series and which case or documentary you'd like me to cover next. And as always, thanks for supporting the show, and be good to one another. Once again, we'd like to thank Completing the Puzzle for sponsoring this video. Completing the Puzzle is the first ever puzzle rental subscription service delivered right to your door. Join over 60,000 happy puzzlers at completingthepuzzles.com and use our discount code OUAC for $10 off your first subscription box or gift card. Completing the Puzzle, because no one's been murdered while doing a puzzle.